Harley-Davidson is a name that screams legacy. Thunderous engines, chrome pride, and machines built to last forever. But here's the twist. Not every Harley carries that glory. Some of them are quietly losing value faster than riders can keep up. What once symbolized freedom on two wheels is now turning into a financial trap. And as 2026 approaches, a few models are about to hit rock bottom in ways no one saw coming. Street 750. Harley-Davidson launched the Street 750 back in 2014 with big dreams. The company wanted to pull in younger riders who lived in cities and wanted something nimble, but with that Harley rumble. The marketing looked great, the price point seemed right, and dealers were excited to finally have something for the budget-conscious crowd. But then reality hit, and it hit hard. Within months of the Street 750 hitting showrooms, problems started piling up faster than unpaid parking tickets. Riders began complaining about overheating issues that made summer rides feel like sitting on a campfire. The engine would get so hot that some owners reported feeling uncomfortable heat radiating through their legs during stop-and-go traffic. We're talking temperatures that could probably cook an egg on the cylinder head if you were patient enough. Quality control seemed like it was handled by someone who was having a really bad week, because the bikes came with cheap parts that felt more at home on a discount scooter than a Harley-Davidson. The engine problems went deeper than just heat. The Revolution X engine, built in India as part of Harley's cost-cutting measures, simply wasn't up to the standards riders expected from the brand. Performance was lackluster at best, with acceleration that felt more adequate than exciting. Riders coming from other entry-level bikes were often shocked at how underwhelming the power delivery felt. The bike struggled on highways, vibrated excessively at certain RPM ranges, and produced a sound that didn't quite capture that classic Harley character people were paying for. Buying a Street 750 was like ordering a steak and getting a hamburger that's also somehow overcooked and undercooked at the same time. Dealers quickly realized they had a problem. These bikes weren't moving off the floor the way Harley hoped they would. New riders who came in excited about owning their first Harley would take a test ride, feel the heat, notice the build quality, and suddenly remember they had other things to do. Word spread fast in the riding community, and the Street 750 earned itself a reputation that no amount of marketing could fix. Online forums filled up with complaints, YouTube reviews turned brutal, and anyone considering buying one could find 100 reasons not to within 5 minutes of searching. The target market rejection was particularly damaging. Young urban riders, the exact demographic Harley was courting, proved to be the most vocal critics. They compared the Street 750 to competitors from Honda, Yamaha, and Kawasaki that cost similar money but offered better build quality, more reliable engines, and superior performance. Social media became a battleground where Street 750 owners shared horror stories, while potential buyers took notes and walked away. The very audience Harley needed to capture was actively warning each other to stay away from this motorcycle. The resale value tanked almost immediately. Owners who bought these bikes brand new watched their investment lose value faster than ice cream melts in Arizona. By 2017, you could find Street 750 EL sitting on used bike lots with price tags that made you wonder if someone forgot a zero. The depreciation was so bad that financial experts started using it as an example of what not to buy if you cared about resale value. The build quality issues extended beyond just cheap parts. Paint would chip easier than it should, chrome would tarnish faster than expected, and various components would rattle or vibrate loose with regular use. Owners found themselves making trips to the dealership for warranty work more often than they made trips to scenic riding destinations. The Street 750 spent more time in the shop than a mechanic's personal project bike. Then 2021 rolled around, and Harley-Davidson finally pulled the plug on the Street 750. Production stopped, and the motorcycle world collectively shrugged. Nobody was particularly sad to see it go. Since discontinuation, whatever was left of the resale value completely crashed. Owners trying to sell these bikes today are discovering that potential buyers treat them like radioactive furniture. The combination of being discontinued, having a terrible reputation, and lacking any collector appeal has created a perfect storm of worthlessness. Anyone still holding on to a Street 750, hoping the value might bounce back, is in for a disappointing reality check. The market has made its decision, and that decision is harsh. These bikes represent everything that can go wrong when a manufacturer tries to chase a new demographic without properly developing the product. As we head into 2026, the Street 750's value will only continue its downward spiral, making it one of the worst Harley investments anyone could have made. But if you think budget bikes were the only category where Harley struggled, wait until you see what happened with their premium touring lineup. Road Glide Ultra, 2015 to 2017. The Road Glide Ultra was supposed to be the ultimate long-distance touring machine. Harley built it for riders who wanted to eat up highway miles in comfort. The frame-mounted fairing was designed to cut through wind better than traditional fork-mounted fairings, and on long rides that aerodynamic advantage actually made a difference. Here's where things get complicated. The 2015 to 2017 models were caught in an awkward transition period. The infotainment systems in these bikes feel ancient compared to what's available today. We're talking touchscreens that respond slower than a teenager asked to do chores, navigation that gets confused easily, and sound systems that make you wonder if technology peaked in 2005. Maintenance costs on these models hit harder than expected too. The touring setup means there's more stuff that can break, and when something goes wrong, the repair bills can make your wallet cry. Parts aren't cheap, labor isn't cheap, and the complexity of these machines means even simple fixes can turn into expensive projects. Owners started realizing that the long-term cost of keeping a Road Glide Ultra running smoothly was eating into their vacation budget. The electronic issues became legendary among Road Glide Ultra owners from this era. The infotainment system wasn't just slow, it would freeze, crash, and sometimes refuse to turn on at all. GPS navigation had a tendency to lose signal at the worst possible moments, leaving riders stranded without directions in unfamiliar territory. The radio would mysteriously change stations, the volume controls would stop responding, and software updates that were supposed to fix these problems often made them worse. Riders joked that they needed to reboot their motorcycle more often than their laptop. These weren't quirks, they were fundamental problems that made the premium touring experience feel more like a beta test. The weight of these bikes became another issue that people didn't fully appreciate until they owned one. Moving a fully loaded Road Glide Ultra around in a parking lot or maneuvering it at low speeds required strength and confidence. Newer touring bikes from Harley and competitors started using lighter materials and better engineering to reduce weight without sacrificing capability. The difference was significant enough that riders who rode newer models and then got back on their 2015 to 2017 Ultra immediately felt like they were wrestling with an unnecessarily heavy machine. Owning a pre-2018 Road Glide Ultra is like having a fancy watch that loses time and costs a fortune to wind. Then 2019 arrived, and Harley released updated versions that made the older models look like relics from a museum. The newer Road Glides came with massively improved infotainment systems, better electronics, refined engines, and features that actually worked the way modern riders expected them to. The difference was so dramatic that anyone comparing a 2017 model to a 2020 model could immediately see why the older ones were being left behind. This created a huge problem for anyone trying to sell a 2015 to 2017 Road Glide Ultra. Buyers shopping for touring bikes would see these older models, check the specs, then look at what the newer versions offered, and the decision became obvious. Why pay a significant amount for outdated technology when spending a bit more gets you something vastly superior? The technology gap became embarrassing. Features that newer models had as standard equipment were either completely absent or so primitive on the older bikes that they might as well not exist. Bluetooth connectivity that actually worked, navigation systems that didn't require a degree in computer science to operate, and sound systems that produced clear audio instead of distorted noise. These road glides depreciated faster than a new car driven off the lot, except the new car smell was replaced with the scent of regret. Dealers started avoiding these bikes like they had a contagious disease. Trade-in values dropped to the point where owners felt insulted by the offers they were getting. Some riders decided to just keep their bikes rather than accept the lowball prices, hoping maybe someday the market would improve. That someday hasn't arrived, and it's not looking promising. The gap between what owners think their Road Glide Ultra is worth and what buyers are willing to pay has become a canyon that seems impossible to cross. While premium touring bikes struggled with outdated tech, Harley's entry-level lineup was facing a completely different kind of extinction. Sportster Iron 883. For years, the Iron 883 was the go-to bike for first-time Harley buyers. The combination of classic styling, a lower price tag, and that unmistakable Harley badge made it incredibly popular. Dealerships loved having it in their lineup because it opened the door for people who wanted a Harley but couldn't afford the bigger models. The problem with being popular for a long time is that eventually something better comes along and makes you look old. That's exactly what happened when Harley released the Sportster S in 2023. This wasn't just a minor update or a refreshed version of the same bike. The Sportster S was a complete reimagining of what a Sportster could be. It came with a liquid-cooled Revolution Max engine, modern electronics, better suspension, improved handling and styling that made the old Iron 883 look like it belonged in a museum exhibit. The old air-cooled Evolution engine in the Iron 883 suddenly felt rough, outdated, and inefficient. Riders who rode both bikes back-to-back couldn't believe they were from the same manufacturer. The difference in power delivery, smoothness, and overall riding experience was night and day. The Iron 883 went from being the cool entry-level bike to the motorcycle equivalent of a flip phone in the smartphone era. Dealers started reporting a steady decline in trade-in values for the Iron 883 over the past 2 years. Owners trying to upgrade to the new Sportster S or other modern bikes were shocked at how little their Iron 883 was worth. These bikes had held their value reasonably well for years, but once the Sportster S hit the market, everything changed. The used market got flooded with Iron 883s from riders wanting to upgrade, and basic economics took over. New riders shopping for their first Harley now have a tough choice. They can buy a used Iron 883 for a lower price and get outdated technology, or save a bit more and get something modern that won't feel obsolete before they finish making payments. Most are choosing the latter, which means Iron 883s are sitting unsold longer than ever before. The riding experience on an Iron 883 isn't terrible, but it's not competitive anymore. The engine vibrates more than modern bikes. The suspension is basic, the seat gets uncomfortable on longer rides, and the lack of modern features makes it feel stripped down in a bad way, rather than minimalist in a cool way. Fuel efficiency on the Iron 883 also falls short compared to modern alternatives. The old Evolution engine gets decent mileage for its era, but newer liquid-cooled engines squeeze more miles out of every gallon while producing more power and running cooler. In an age where gas prices fluctuate wildly and environmental concerns matter more to younger buyers, the Iron 883's thirsty engine becomes another mark against it. Riders doing the math realized they were spending significantly more on fuel over time compared to newer bikes, adding to the total cost of ownership in ways that made the lower purchase price less attractive. Harley basically gave the Iron 883 the same treatment Netflix gave to Blockbuster, except faster. Enthusiasts who appreciate traditional air-cooled engines and simple mechanics still defend the Iron 883, arguing it has character and soul that modern bikes lack. That's fine for personal preference, but it doesn't help resale value. The market has spoken, and it's saying that character and soul don't pay the bills when you're trying to sell a motorcycle. Speaking of bikes that couldn't find their audience, there's one Harley experiment that managed to upset both traditional riders and performance enthusiasts at the same time. V-Rod muscle. When Harley-Davidson teamed up with Porsche to develop the V-Rod line, they created something that divided the motorcycle world. The V-Rod muscle represented Harley's attempt to build a performance-oriented bike that could compete with sport cruisers. The engine was powerful, the design was aggressive, and on paper, it seemed like Harley was finally ready to challenge perceptions. Traditional Harley fans absolutely hated it. The styling didn't look like a Harley should look. The riding position was too forward. The whole vibe felt wrong to people who wanted chrome, leather, and that classic cruiser stance. To them, the V-Rod muscle was a betrayal of everything Harley-Davidson stood for. The performance crowd, who might have appreciated what the V-Rod muscle offered, weren't interested either. They looked at sport bikes from Japanese manufacturers that offered similar or better performance for less money, with better reliability and cheaper parts. The V-Rod muscle ended up in this weird middle ground where it was too different for traditional Harley buyers, but not compelling enough for performance enthusiasts. By 2017, the company discontinued the entire V-Rod line. The V-Rod muscle had an identity crisis so bad it could have started a support group with the Pontiac Aztec. That's when things got worse for owners. Once production stopped, parts availability became a growing concern. Harley continued supporting the platform, but finding specific components started taking longer and costing more. Independent mechanics who specialized in traditional Harleys weren't always familiar with the V-Rod's unique engine and systems. Owners discovered that maintaining their bike required either finding specialists or paying dealer service rates that made their eyes water. The used market got flooded with V-Rods from owners who decided to cut their losses and move on. Every classified site, every dealership, every motorcycle forum had V-Rod muscles for sale. When supply overwhelms demand this dramatically, prices collapse. Sellers who paid premium prices when these bikes were new watched their investment evaporate faster than morning dew in the desert. Insurance costs on V-Rod muscles also surprised many owners. Because these bikes were marketed as performance machines, insurance companies classified them accordingly and charged premiums that reflected the higher risk category. Owners who thought they were getting an affordable Harley discovered that the total cost of ownership included insurance bills that rivaled bikes with twice the displacement. The liquid-cooled engine, while powerful and advanced for Harley, became another point of concern for potential buyers. Traditional Harley riders weren't familiar with maintaining liquid-cooled systems, and the cooling system added complexity that air-cooled purists wanted nothing to do with. Performance riders from other brands saw the liquid cooling as standard and unremarkable, not a selling point. The cooling system also meant additional maintenance requirements and potential failure points that increased long-term ownership costs. Coolant changes, radiator maintenance, and the possibility of leaks or system failures added layers of concern that deterred buyers already skeptical about the discontinued platform. Trying to sell a V-Rod muscle became harder than explaining the plot of Inception to someone who fell asleep halfway through. The depreciation has been brutal and relentless. 7 years after discontinuation, these bikes are worth a fraction of their original price, and the decline shows no signs of stopping. Collectors haven't developed interest because the V-Rod never achieved iconic status. Enthusiasts who love them already own one. New riders don't want a discontinued model with parts concerns. But the V-Rod wasn't Harley's only attempt at capturing a younger demographic that went completely sideways. Street Rod 750. Harley tried again with the Street Rod 750, learning absolutely nothing from the Street 750's problems. This bike launched as a sportier version of its troubled predecessor, with better suspension and styling that tried to appeal to younger riders. The marketing suggested this was the bike for urban riders who needed performance and agility. They made it too tall. New riders who were the target audience couldn't flat-foot the bike at stops, which immediately created confidence issues. Nobody wants to buy their first motorcycle and feel like they might drop it every time they pull up to a red light. The suspension improvements that were supposed to make it sportier ended up making it uncomfortable. The ride was harsh, especially on rough city streets where these bikes were supposedly designed to excel. Riders felt every pothole, every crack in the pavement, every imperfection in the road. What Harley called sporty, owners called punishing. The Street Rod 750 was priced like a premium bike, but delivered an experience like a budget rental car with a broken air conditioner. Then there was the price. Harley positioned the Street Rod 750 at a point where it cost significantly more than the regular Street 750, but didn't offer enough additional value to justify the difference. New riders looking at the price tag could buy a used bike from another manufacturer with better reliability and comfort for the same money. The engine, carried over from the Street 750, brought all the same overheating and quality concerns that plagued its sibling. Harley did nothing to address the fundamental problems with the power plant. They just wrapped it in different bodywork and called it sporty. The Street name had become toxic, and slapping Rod in the middle didn't change that fact. Production limped along for a few years with sales numbers that probably made Harley executives wince during quarterly meetings. By 2020, the company quietly discontinued the Street Rod 750, and nobody threw a farewell party. Dealers who still had unsold inventory started discounting them heavily just to clear showroom space. These bikes depreciated so fast they could have won a race against their own shadow. Fast forward to today, and Street Rod 750s are selling for barely half their original price, assuming you can find a buyer at all. The combination of being discontinued, having an uncomfortable ride, and carrying the stigma of the street line has made these bikes nearly impossible to sell at any reasonable price. Private sellers list them online and watch the days turn into weeks with no serious inquiries. And if you thought smaller bikes had it rough, there's a classic Harley design that's suffering from its own set of problems that nobody saw coming. 48. The 48 caught everyone's attention when it first rolled out. That compact, retro styling turned heads at every stoplight. The peanut tank, the chopped fenders, the aggressive stance, everything about it screamed classic Harley attitude. Riders loved how it looked, and social media was full of photos showing off that distinctive profile. Then people actually tried to ride it for more than 20 minutes, and reality set in hard. That gorgeous little 2.1-gallon tank that looked so cool turned out to be a massive practical problem. Riders were stopping for gas more often than they stopped for coffee. The fuel range was embarrassingly short, forcing owners to plan their routes around gas stations like they were navigating a desert with limited water supplies. The 48 had a fuel tank so small it made goldfish bowls look spacious. The suspension was another deal breaker that nobody fully appreciated until they owned one. Harsh doesn't even begin to describe it. Every bump in the road transmitted directly through the frame and into the rider's spine. Potholes felt like hitting a brick wall. Rough pavement turned short rides into chiropractic emergencies waiting to happen. Ergonomics on the 48 were cramped in ways that made tall riders feel like they were trying to fold themselves into a suitcase. The riding position forced people into an uncomfortable stance that got old real fast. Daily riders quickly discovered the 48 wasn't practical for actual daily use. The small tank meant constant fuel stops. The harsh ride meant arriving at work feeling beat up. The limited storage meant grocery runs required creative packing solutions or a backpack. The seat, while looking appropriately minimalist for the bobber aesthetic, provided about as much comfort as sitting on a wooden plank wrapped in leather. Long-term comfort was clearly sacrificed at the altar of style. Riders would develop numbness and discomfort within 30 minutes, making even moderate-length rides an exercise in pain management. The aftermarket sprang up with various seat options promising better comfort, but these modifications added cost to a bike that was already proving to be a poor value proposition. Many owners found themselves spending hundreds of dollars on seat upgrades just to make the bike tolerable for rides longer than a quick trip around town. Riding a 48 daily was like wearing dress shoes to run a marathon. Technically possible, but nobody's idea of a good time. Then Harley started releasing the new Sportster models that offered better comfort, longer range, and modern features while still maintaining that Harley character. The comparison made the 48 look like a styling exercise that forgot about the rider experience. New buyers looking at Sportsters could get something that actually worked well for regular riding instead of just looking good in photos. Demand has been dropping steadily as riders realize the bike's limitations outweigh its style points. The used market shows this clearly, with 48s sitting unsold while other Sportster models move quickly. Sellers try emphasizing the classic looks and the attention the bike gets, but buyers are more interested in practical concerns. Collectors haven't shown much interest in the 48 either. It's too recent to be vintage and too common to be rare. The styling, while distinctive, isn't enough to overcome the practical problems that make it more of a garage ornament than a usable motorcycle. But style wasn't the only thing that could make or break a Harley's value. Sometimes the problem was stuffing too much old technology into a heavy package. The Electroglide Ultra Classic pre-2018. Older Electroglide Ultra Classics were the kings of highway comfort for decades. These bikes were built for riders who wanted to cover serious miles in maximum comfort. Leather seats, massive fairings, loads of storage, and that classic Harley presence made them favorites among serious touring riders. The twin-cam engines in these pre-2018 models have a heat problem that anyone who's ridden one in traffic knows all too well. These engines run hot, really hot, to the point where summer riding becomes uncomfortable and long stops in traffic feel like sitting next to a furnace. The heat radiating off the engine can make riders feel like they're slowly being cooked, especially on the inner thighs. Vibration is another issue that became more noticeable as newer, smoother engines hit the market. The twin-cam engines vibrate more at highway speeds, and while some riders call this character, most people call it annoying. Long rides mean hours of constant vibration that rattles mirrors, loosens bolts, and turns hands numb. The weight of these machines was always significant, but as Harley and competitors figured out ways to reduce weight without sacrificing capability, the old Electroglide Ultra Classics started feeling like dinosaurs. Moving them around parking lots, handling them at low speeds, and dealing with them in tight situations required real strength and confidence. Pre-2018 Electroglides were built like tanks and handled like them too, except tanks probably turned easier. Infotainment systems in these older models feel like ancient history now. The screens are small, the responses are slow, the interfaces are clunky, and the features are limited compared to what newer bikes offer. Navigation that made sense in 2015 feels hopelessly outdated in 2025. Bluetooth connectivity that barely worked then still barely works now. Buyers shopping for touring bikes today have high expectations. They want modern infotainment, they want comfortable engines that don't cook their legs, they want reasonable weight, and they want smooth power delivery. The pre-2018 Electroglide Ultra Classics fail on every one of these points. These Electroglides aged about as well as milk left on a summer dashboard. Dealers avoid taking these bikes as trade-ins unless the numbers make sense, which increasingly they don't. The cost to recondition them, the floor space they occupy, and the difficulty moving them makes dealers reluctant to stock pre-2018 Ultras. Private sellers struggle even more, competing against dealer inventory of newer used bikes that offer dramatically better value. Maintenance costs on older touring bikes add up quickly. The complexity of these machines means more things can go wrong, and when they do, the repair bills hurt. Buyers factor these future costs into their purchase decisions, and it pushes them toward newer models. The cam chain tensioner problems that plagued many twin-cam engines added another layer of worry for potential buyers. This known issue could lead to catastrophic engine failure if not addressed, and the repair wasn't cheap. Savvy buyers researching pre-2018 Ultras would discover this problem and either walk away entirely or use it as heavy negotiating leverage to drive prices down even further. Sellers found themselves either paying for the repair before listing the bike or accepting significantly lower offers from buyers who factored in the cost and risk of this potential failure. Either way, it was another hit to the already declining value of these motorcycles. Dynafat Bob. Dynafans were a special breed of Harley rider who loved the raw, unrefined feel of these bikes. The Dyna series had a reputation for being more connected to the road, with a riding experience that felt more mechanical and direct than the smoother Softail models. The rigid-mounted engine meant riders felt every pulse and vibration, which Dyna enthusiasts considered a feature rather than a flaw. Then 2018 happened, and Harley discontinued the entire Dyna line and merged those models into the Softail family. The explanation was that new Softail frames could deliver better performance while maintaining character, but Dyna fans weren't buying it. The discontinuation created immediate problems for Dyna owners. Replacement parts for Dyna-specific components started becoming harder to find. While Harley continued supporting the platform with maintenance parts, specialized performance upgrades and custom components began drying up as manufacturers shifted focus to the current lineup. The used market got flooded with Dynas from owners who decided to move on to current models. Some sold because they were worried about long-term parts availability. Others sold because they wanted the improved performance of the new Softail Fat Bob. Whatever the reason, supply increased dramatically, while demand couldn't keep up. Suspension upgrades, a common modification among Dyna owners who wanted better handling, became increasingly difficult to source as aftermarket companies moved on to newer platforms. The rear suspension setup that made Dynas unique also made them challenging to improve. And with production ended, companies weren't developing new solutions for old problems. Owners who wanted to modify their Fat Bobs discovered that the golden era of Dyna aftermarket support had passed, leaving them with fewer options and higher costs for what remained available. The vibrant aftermarket that once made Dyna so appealing to customization enthusiasts essentially dried up, leaving current owners stuck with limited upgrade paths. Dyna Fat Bobs went from cult favorites to orphaned children faster than you could say frame-mounted engine. The new Softail Fat Bob that replaced the Dyna version offered genuinely better performance. The updated frame provided improved handling, the refined engine delivered smoother power, and the overall package felt more modern while maintaining that aggressive Fat Bob attitude. Riders comparing the two bikes back-to-back could feel the improvements immediately. Collectors have shown some interest in late-model Dynas, particularly special editions and well-maintained examples, but this hasn't been enough to support values across the board. Regular Dyna Fat Bobs from 2010 to 2017 are too common and too recent to command collector premiums. The Dyna Fat Bob's resale value dropped faster than a bowling ball in a swimming pool. The riding experience on a Dyna Fat Bob is still enjoyable for people who appreciate that old-school feel, but enjoyable doesn't equal valuable in today's market. The combination of being discontinued, having parts concerns, and facing competition from superior replacements has pushed values down steadily. Though loyal Dyna riders at least got a replacement model, owners of Harley's luxury line watched their expensive investments become expensive problems. The CVO breakout. Custom vehicle operations models represented the pinnacle of Harley-Davidson's production lineup. These were factory customs built with premium paint, top-shelf components, exclusive styling, and price tags that made regular Harley models look affordable. The CVO breakout combined aggressive chopper styling with luxury features. The early CVO breakouts from 2013 to 2016 came loaded with chrome everywhere. The aesthetic was bold, flashy, and impossible to ignore. At the time, this heavy chrome look represented luxury and exclusivity. Flash forward to today, and those same styling choices make these bikes look dated and overdone. Modern design trends have moved toward cleaner lines and more restrained use of chrome. Maintaining a CVO isn't like maintaining a regular Harley. Everything costs more because everything is premium. Custom paint repairs cost more. Specialty parts cost more. Labor costs more because mechanics need to be careful with high-end finishes. Owners discovered that the total cost of ownership on these bikes was significantly higher than they expected. CVO breakouts depreciated so hard they made luxury cars look like stable investments. The exclusivity that made CVOs special when new becomes a problem when selling used. The pool of buyers who can afford a used CVO and actually want one is small. Most riders shopping in this price range would rather buy a newer non-CVO model with modern features than an older CVO with dated styling. Collectors focus their attention on either very early CVOs that have genuine historical significance or the latest models with current styling and technology. The 2013 to 2016 breakouts fall into an awkward middle ground where they're neither vintage enough to be collectible nor modern enough to be desirable. Insurance and storage costs add to the ownership burden. These bikes were expensive when new, so insurance companies still rate them accordingly, even though market values have dropped significantly. Owners pay premiums based on what the bike cost originally, not what it's worth now. Limited editions and special paint schemes that were supposed to make these bikes more valuable haven't helped much. The used market is flooded with special edition CVOs because Harley produced quite a few of them, and they all depreciated together. Having a unique paint color doesn't matter when dozens of other unique paint colors are also for sale. The exclusivity that defined the CVO experience evaporated once enough of them hit the used market at the same time. Buyers looking at used CVOs could take their pick from multiple special editions, all competing for attention, which meant sellers had no leverage, even with supposedly rare color combinations or trim packages. Owning a 2013 to 2016 CVO breakout became like owning a boat. The two best days are when you buy it and when you sell it, except selling is actually the hard part. The depreciation curve on these early breakouts has been brutal. Bikes that sold for north of $40,000 new are now struggling to fetch half that amount in good condition. The combination of dated styling, expensive maintenance, heavy chrome that's fallen out of fashion, and limited buyer interest has created a perfect storm of value loss. But if you thought expensive customs had value problems, there's one mainstream model that proves even reliable favorites can become unwanted overnight. Street Glide Standard, pre-2020. The Street Glide Standard was Harley's workhorse touring bike for years. Riders who wanted the touring capability and batwing fairing without all the bells and whistles of the special or ultra models made the Standard their choice. It delivered solid performance, comfortable highway cruising, and enough storage for weekend trips without the complexity and cost of the more loaded versions. Technology started changing faster than Harley's product cycles could keep up with. The pre-2020 Street Glide standards came with infotainment systems that were adequate when new, but quickly became outdated as smartphone integration. And better screens became standard expectations. Riders wanted Apple CarPlay, they wanted Android Auto, they wanted crisp touchscreens that responded instantly. Comfort upgrades in newer Street Glides made the older standards feel like budget options rather than solid choices. Improved seat designs, better suspension tuning, refined ergonomics, and countless small improvements added up to a significantly better riding experience in newer models. The Street Glide standard became the motorcycle equivalent of a base model sedan. It'll get you there, but nobody brags about owning one. Dealers started discounting used pre-2020 standards aggressively just to move them off the floor. These bikes occupied valuable showroom space while generating minimal interest from customers who walked past them to look at newer models. Trade-in values reflected this lack of demand, with offers that shocked owners. The touring market became increasingly competitive as other manufacturers improved their offerings. Riders shopping for touring bikes had more choices than ever, and many of those choices offered better technology, lower prices, or superior performance compared to pre-2020 Street Glide standards. Pre-2020 Street Glide standards lost value faster than ice sculptures in July. Private sellers struggled even more than dealers. Without the backing of a dealership warranty or service department, private party bikes had to compete purely on price. Sellers found themselves constantly dropping asking prices to generate interest, only to discover that even lower prices weren't enough to close deals. The resale reality for pre-2020 Street Glide standards is harsh and getting harsher. These bikes represented solid value when new, but the rapid pace of technology advancement and comfort improvements left them behind faster than anyone expected. By 2026, they'll be 3 or more generations old in terms of technology, making them nearly impossible to sell at prices that make financial sense. Limited edition versions and special paint schemes haven't helped values much. The touring bike market cares more about technology and comfort than color schemes. A unique paint job doesn't overcome outdated infotainment or inferior suspension tuning. Sellers tried emphasizing the exclusivity of their particular model, but buyers focused on the functionality and features where newer bikes had clear advantages. Style points couldn't overcome substance shortcomings. Harley's announcement of a major refresh coming in 2026 made things worse for pre-2020 standard owners. Buyers who heard about updated models on the horizon decided to wait rather than buy used bikes that would be 2 generations old once the new ones arrived. The anticipation of better bikes coming soon killed demand for older models today. Sellers watching this unfold realized they needed to act fast before the 2026 models hit and made their already struggling to sell bikes even less desirable. The market was essentially frozen as potential buyers held off, leaving current owners stuck with depreciating assets they couldn't move at any reasonable price. The bottom line? These Harleys are financial black holes on 2 wheels. If you're still holding on to one hoping values will bounce back, you're not being loyal. You're being delusional. Sell now before 2026 makes a bad situation worse, because the market has already made its decision and it's not changing its mind.